And so, hey, all right, we are recording, and it is August 22nd. Let's see here. I'm just going to I'll go to speaker. That's weird. For me, I'm recording, so I want to make sure it's not someone else on the screen. Let's see here. Pin video. All right, well, I'm still learning a little bit about how Zoom works. But anyway, let's talk a little bit, just to go over what you were to do for last week, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing this week. So for last week, I asked you to do some reading. And let's see here, I will share with you my screen. And here we go. Great. So that's my screen. That is the chaos that is my life as a teacher right now. So let's see, where are we? So if you go to our Blackboard page, it looks like everybody, I think just about everybody was able to hand in their homework. It looks like everybody's pretty comfortable with that. I didn't get any videos. It's okay. It's okay. I didn't get any videos. I got some pretty good some pretty good reviews of what you read. And we're going to get more complex as we continue to go on throughout the semester with how we're going to do this. But just to take a quick look at our, actually in the content section, I asked you guys to read the basic timeline in the textbook on page 26, and then a little bit about Native American oral literature, the Iroquois creation story, and the Navajo creation story. And so today we're going to discuss those in class. Like I said just before I started recording, this recording is going to be for those of you who, some people in my online class who can't make it to these Zoom meetings, to get an idea of where we are in the semester, what we're doing, and to also kind of give you an idea of where to hand things in, what to read, and things like that. When it comes down to our discussions, I don't want to record people. I don't want people to feel uncomfortable. So I will stop the recording when it comes time to just say, hey, these are some things. What do you think? That kind of deal. Because I do want to hear anybody that comes to these. I definitely want you to be able to, we're going to talk about it and have as close to a classroom conversation as possible. The things we're reading are a lot of fun. And so I hope that you'll have fun talking about them with me as well in class. We're going to find that out today. But overall, when it comes to this first part of our semester, when it comes to American literature, we can't forget the Native American literature. And this is one of those things where, unfortunately, we don't have as much written down as we would like to have. And this is primarily because of a few reasons. One is that when the European colonists came to the Americas, a lot of things were lost, a lot of things were destroyed, and so we don't have a whole lot to go off of. But another reason is because a lot of it was passed down through oral tradition. Now, oral tradition is something that you see in pretty much every culture at one point or another, and it's something that actually is. Some people dispute the reliability of oral tradition, but typically oral tradition is pretty reliable as far as transmitting truths through the generations. And you have to remember that, especially when it comes to issues like morality stories, when it comes to things like creation stories, when it comes to things that teach a lesson, it was really important to transmit these truths throughout the whole generations. So it was important, and a lot of times there would be mnemonic devices within these things. There would be you see in a lot of cultures the use of lyrics and the use of rhyme and the use of cadence, and sometimes different ways of telling a story where parts were sung or parts were even performed like with dance and whatnot. And so when we take a look at the Native American literature, of course, there are whole classes on Native American literature, and I highly recommend that you take these classes. This class, we're unable to really cover it in depth, just like every other thing we're reading this semester. We're really not able to cover everything in great detail. But today we're talking a little bit about the Iroquois creation story and the Navajo creation story. Now, a few things that we want to just remember when we're discussing creation stories is the purpose of a creation story. Now, most people taking this class are probably familiar with the Judeo-Christian Genesis creation story. Okay, so whether, however it is that you've heard this story, you're somewhat familiar with some of the stories that are in the book of Genesis and the Judeo-Christian Bible. And so there are things that you can see in these stories, the Iroquois creation story and the Navajo creation story. You can see similarities. You can see things where they're completely different. But a few things that I want you to remember, a few things that I want you to think about when approaching a creation story are the following. One is that a creation story, one of the purposes of a creation story, first, one of them is obvious. Where did we come from? How did we get here? Why is all of this stuff here? And why am I here? There's a real need in the human condition to have some kind of an understanding of origin, where it is from where I came. And you can even take that a step further and say there's a great need within groups of people, within nations, or within tribes to say, where did my people come from? How is it that my people got here? How are we different from the other peoples that we may come in contact with? Another purpose for a creation story is to determine what you're supposed to do while you are here. And so in the ones that we read, there are different things that you can infer. There are things that are specifically taught. But what is the purpose of being here? And again, we can go back to the one that most Westerners are familiar with, which is the creation story of Genesis. And there are similarities there as far as, okay, this is how we got into this predicament or in this condition, or this is how we arrived at this particular state of being. And this is how we are to move forward. And there were mistakes made. We need to learn from those mistakes, and we can move forward and hopefully make a better life and hopefully do well with this creation that we've been put into. So we have these things that are pretty universal across the board when you look at any creation story, and these are no different. When it comes to the Iroquois and creation story specifically, we see especially a focus on good and evil, on those concepts. And oftentimes in creation stories, you're going to see something about how good and evil came into the world and how those things manifest in the ways that we live as beings in this realm or this planet, or however the culture understood themselves to be. You'll also see in the Navajo creation story issues that are really common. And this is something that as we move forward in literature, regardless if it is American literature or European or any form, anything that has to do with telling stories, okay? We might even consider just the humanities as a whole, no matter where it is in the world, when it is in time, you're going to see issues of the human condition. And you can go back to the Mesopotamian story of the Epic of Gilgamesh, and you're seeing things like friendship, friction, jealousy. You see these in the Navajo creation story, especially. I mean, we see this in both of the Iroquois and Navajo creation story, but I'm sure you can think of especially the war between the sexes, right? The story, especially where it's talking about how the women and men, they had some time where they were living apart, and there is a whole friction between the sexes in this creation story. And it's interesting that is especially highlighted. There's a whole longer section just about that. So these are things that you're going to see, especially woven into these stories, issues of the human condition, things that really all human beings can relate to. These are not specific just to the Native Americans who are living here. There's everything here has to do with good, evil, male, female, What are we supposed to do? Where did we come from? Our relationship to nature, our relationship in the world. And so you see these in these creation stories. So as we move forward, and of course, look really good. Most of you guys were able to get your homework done on time and hand it into the right place. If for some reason you had any trouble and you still weren't able to figure that out over the weekend, let's make sure to get in contact with me if you just can't figure it out. I'll help you find the place to hand it in. Remember, it's pretty simple with this class. Everything you'll hand in, in week one, you click here and, you've got some things to watch. But then at the bottom, week one, writing or video. It seemed like everybody pretty much had was able to get that taken care of. Okay, so having said that, for one of the things I did ask you to do also was to, and this is looking forward into the future, we're going to have a discussion here in just a minute about the literature specifically. But I did ask you to watch these videos to get a good idea of a lot of the things that are coming up. So make sure if you haven't already done so, make sure to watch those videos. And for next week, I'd like you to read everything on this list here. So John Smith's writings, so it's page 110 to 128, John Winthrop, and Bradstreet. So make sure to read those specific readings. Coming back to the Native American literature, we're going to have a brief discussion here in class. One of the interesting things before we get started is that, and you may have noticed this in both of the readings in the text, there are variations. Now, many people do attribute this to the fact that it is oral literature. And so the fact that it has been transmitted by word of mouth, so there's going to be some variation. So when it comes to, for instance, I forget, one or two people said that they had a hard time getting the textbook, so they were unable to read it directly out of the textbook. These are on the internet. However, there are variations, and you're going to see, even if you watch videos where there are some videos where like an instructor or a teacher will be going over the lesson, you're going to see variation. And I'm glad in our textbook, that's one nice thing about this particular textbook, is that it points out a lot of the variation. It points out a lot of the, sometimes it's kind of hard to understand, especially, I don't know if you guys noticed in the Iroquois creation story, some of just the way it was worded made it kind of difficult to understand, and that's totally fine. And just so you know, get used to it. Because early American literature is full of that. Actually, John Smith, it's funny, when we're reading John Smith, as you go about reading him, just know that he was not read because people said he was a great writer. He just happened to be in the place where everybody was wanting to read about. It's like if you went to the moon and you're the only person who's gone there, yeah, people are going to read whatever you write, even if you can't string a sentence very well together. So there's going to be times when the writing may be difficult to understand, when, especially with the Native American literature, where maybe there was some difficulty in translation. If you notice in both of these stories that there were no use of paragraphs. And that may have been something that, I don't know if you noticed that, but there were no paragraphs. It was just one long thing of text. Well, this makes it difficult sometimes to know kind of where you left off if you were reading it. But also, especially in the Navajo creation story, there were the use of paragraphs well, actually there were no use of paragraphs in this, but there were many stories within this long narrative. So as we go forward, you're going to see different changes in the way these things are written down, the way they're printed. Just be prepared for that. Also, be ready to make notes in your book. It's okay to make some notes in your book if you want to. Of course, you can sell these back to the bookstore as well, or you can sell them to other English majors as they come along. But sometimes, especially whenever we run into text where there's not easy way of telling one part from the next, it's okay to make some marks. I always do it myself. So, okay, so having said that, the assignment for next week is on Blackboard. It's the John Smith, John Waltrip, and Ann Bradstreet. I want you to, again, just as a reminder of what we're trying to do with these reading, with the weekly writings, I want you to pick one of those three, okay? Just one of the three, and I want you to write a paragraph describing what happens in that particular reading, okay? So summarize, essentially, this is what John Smith was talking about, or Ann Bradstreet, okay? This is what I read about, okay? And then the second paragraph, I want you to tell me about what you think about it, how it applies, your impressions of it, maybe the meaning. Maybe you can glean a meaning from it. Maybe you take the time, which I encourage you to do, maybe you're going to take the time to look at the historical context from which this particular reading was taken. And you're going to say, well, for the time, this is what was said, and this is the probable meaning. This is probably why. Another thing you can do is you can find a secondary resource. Okay, so in literature, we have primary resources and we have secondary resources. A primary resource is the actual reading itself. Okay, so the primary resource is whatever piece of literature we're reading, that's it. The secondary resource, that is going to be something where someone is writing about the piece of literature in discussion. So for instance, today you might have found a secondary resource explaining the Navajo creation story. Great. Well, that's something that would help you understand the Navajo creation story better. And I'm all for that. Okay. It's not cheating, but I don't want you to just go to like SparkNotes either. Okay. So I want you to find, but if you have to go to SparkNotes to understand it, that's okay. The goal is to understand it. The goal is to get into it as much as you can. All right. That is totally fine. I just don't want you to, just take the easy way out every single time. Okay. Having said that, we're going to have a discussion. For those of you who could not make it today, I would love it if you came to one of these Zoom meetings. They're Mondays at noon, and that's typically going to be the only time we have them. And it's going to be a time when we can do our discussions over any of the literature that we talk about, and just so that I am the only person being recorded, and nobody feels like they don't want to say something because they're being recorded. I am going to not record the discussion, but now we have a pretty good idea of what we're doing for next week. So take a look at those readings. I do have in the week 2, I do have some stuff in here to help you understand the time periods better. I have a PowerPoint overview of basically the Puritans, so you get a better handle on, well, it's not working on my computer right now, but maybe it'll work on yours. If you don't look at it, it's not the end of the world. And I do also have a video for you to watch as well. So next week, make sure to do those readings and make sure to do your week 2 writing and or video. And we will hopefully see you there. All right, so I'm going to stop recording and we're going to have a discussion. Awesome. Okay. I'm done with that. All right. So guys, all right. So I want to open it up, and don't worry, I'm not going to scold you if you have problems understanding these things, or if and hey, we're reading literature that's been translated, and it's different kind of point of view on the creation of the universe in some cases. Let's just talk about these real quick, because you guys had some pretty good things that you said in your writing. Okay, so if all you do today is kind of rehash some of the things you wrote, that's okay too. It's just no fun, and it's, I think it's kind of healthy. It's healthy for a person to have to, say a little something about literature that you read. I mean, you did the reading. So let's talk a little bit about the Iroquois creation story. Any thoughts? Anything that just kind of hits you on that one? Or I tell you what, even better. I'm going to open it up to whatever you want to talk about. You want to talk about the Iroquois creation story, the Navajo creation story? You just let me know. Somebody say something. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Nobody's saying anything.
All right, I'll start.
Very bad. Thank you.
I like the Iroquois one myself better.
Okay.
I had to find it online though.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. So in that particular story, yeah, what'd you like?
I just, God, I shouldn't have spoke first.
No, you're fine. I'm good. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Give me a second.
That's fine. Yeah, take your time. So review. Let's review what was in that story. Okay. So, all right. So we have the, this is, I don't know if you've ever seen, a lot of times people reference this particular story, the idea that we're on a giant turtle. Have you ever seen that reference before in pop culture? Okay. So that is, you know, this is kind of where it's coming from. We have the Sky Mother, right? So, and that's one of those things where really in this particular story, I think more so even than the Navajo story, it's important to read the footnotes because, you know, these footnotes really kind of illustrate, and there's sometimes, did you guys find it a little hard to read at sometimes? It was a little, the way it was worded maybe.
In the beginning, yeah.
Say what?
In the beginning, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, it takes a little bit to it. Yeah. So let's see. So what can we say about this? What do you think? We've got the Sky Mother, and I guess where did all this start? Where did this whole thing start? Started in the darkness, right? They had the lower world and the upper world. Mm-hmm. And I love how they have monsters. You know, there's no good story without monsters, so you got to have some monsters. And then what happened? We have the Sky Mother. She started to sink down into the darkness. And then what? So we had the turtle helper, right? Kind of brought her back up a little bit. And then what'd she do?
And she died.
Yes. Doing what?
Giving
her
birth.
Giving birth.
Yeah.
Partially giving birth.
Right. So there's a whole tussle going on inside this poor Sky Mother. I mean, we talk about a difficult pregnancy. Sky Mother had it bad, right? And so we had, let's see here. I'm going to try to find the names here real quick. So we had Iroquois, and I'm going to mispronounce this, you know, Iroquois, the good mind. The other possessed an insolence of character, and was named Inagon Hahatgia. Why did I try to pronounce that? As if that was helping anybody. Hey, I'm the teacher. I'm going to mispronounce some words for you guys. You're welcome. So, okay. But we have these two. Now, that's another thing that we see in both of these stories. They do a great job of translating this stuff to English for us, but we do see a lot of words that, you know, I mean, these are the easier ones. At least it's in Romanized, you know, alphabet. In the Navajo one, there's some of it that it's technically in the Romanized alphabet as well, but it's far more difficult, in my opinion, to try to pronounce. But okay, so we've got the good mind and the bad mind. And then, I don't know, somebody want to say anything about it? Just throw stuff out there. Any thoughts as far as, you don't even have to tell me the story. I don't care, all right? Okay, so let me back up just a minute. So literature discussion is not like we have to be all like proper, and we don't have to be even reverent. The goal is to discuss. The goal is to just be free and to talk and to have fun with it, and that's it. So don't feel like you have to say something genius. I mean, you see what I'm doing here. I'm trying to fill time while someone hopefully will say something.
I kind of felt like the Iroquois creation story. I kind of like I noticed a parallel kind of with the story of Romulus and Remus with Rome.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of things did you see?
Well, like the good brother killing the bad brother, and how Romulus killed Remus.
Okay. Okay. And so they had this great tussle, right? So the good mind and the bad mind, this good mind was creating all these awesome things. Now the bad mind, as I recall, created like dangerous things. Like if you think about it, like, and this is one of those interesting things about the idea of good and evil, right? So what is good and evil, and how do we know these things? So the good mind created, let's see here, all this nice stuff. The bad mind created like waterfalls, which I think waterfalls are beautiful, but they are dangerous, right? And cliffs. And so it's interesting to see kind of like, okay, that was the mind of evil that formed that. Interesting. It's kind of an interesting point of view on that.
Didn't he form humankind?
Say what?
He formed humankind too,
Yeah.
like out of clay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's another thing. So one of the things that we can get from this is that we came from the earth, right? The Iroquois believe they came from the earth. And that's a thing we see. It's a parallel. You see that in like, for instance, of course, the Judeo-Christian like Genesis story, clay formed from the earth. Let's see, what else? Let's see, I have a mark here. The bad mind, while his brother was making the universe, went through the island and made numerous high, here's, I actually marked it. He made numerous high mountains, falls of water, great steeps, also various reptiles, which would be injurious to mankind. But the good mind restored the island to its former condition. The bad mind proceeded further in his motives, and he made 2 images of clay in the form of mankind. But while he was giving them existence, they became apes. Now this is interesting. Did you see the footnote about the apes? It's on page 34. It's footnote number 8. So the translator may have seen an ape or a depiction of apes, but there are no apes in the native world, right? So the Iroquois, the heart of the Iroquois nation, that was like New York, and so you know what I've got in mind though? Sasquatch. Huh? I don't know. But he's got apes. So there are no apes in the native world. And he decided to name the creatures made them by evil, in contrast, humans made by the good twin. Some later renditions of the Iroquois creation story also refer to apes as at this point in the narrative. So it's kind of weird. So we have this good and evil humans, and it makes you wonder. It does. It's one of those head scratchers. Let's see here. And when he got the power to create mankind, he was envious of his brother, and again he made 2 of clay. The good mind discovered his brother's contrivances and aided in giving them living souls. It is said that these had the most knowledge of good and evil. So there's us, right? The good mind now accomplishes the works of creation, notwithstanding the imaginations of the bad mind were continually evil, and he attempted to enclose all the animals of game in the earth, so as to deprive them of mankind. So he's trying to keep all the buffalo and all the, the game animals away from us. But the good mind released them from the continent. The animals were dispersed, and traces of them remained on the rocks near the cave where it was enclosed. So I always, you see things, on the like documentaries and things like that. It'd be interesting if there's a specific place where that is. The good mind experiences that his brother was the variance with the works of creation and feels not disposed to favor any of his proceedings, but gives admonitions that, I promise I'm a teacher, of his future state. Afterwards, the good mind requested his brother to accompany him. So the good mind is just so good, right? Hey, bad, evil person who's trying to ruin everything I do, accompany me. And then, let's see. But where are we? But he had become so unmanly, he could not conduct his brother anymore. So he said, man, I can't handle you being so bad all the time. The bad mind offered a challenge to his brother and resolved that who gains victory should govern the universe. And guess who won?
The good brother.
The good brother. All right. Well, that was good. On the day they appointed, the engagement commenced, which lasted 2 days. After pulling up the trees and the mountains as the track of a terrible whirlwind, at last, the good mind gained victory by using the horns, as mentioned, the instrument of death, which he succeeded in deceiving his brother and crushed him on the earth. And the last words uttered from the bad mind, and here comes, right? So we feel like, okay, the good mind won, so there should be no bad in the whole world. But wait a minute. So his last words were that he would have equal power over the souls of mankind after death, and he sinks down into eternal doom and became the evil spirit. So, the good mind won, but the bad mind became this evil spirit. Now, if you take a look at number 3, it says, this event may reflect an awareness of the Christian belief in the devil as the ultimate evil spirit ruler of the lower depths. So it could be that the story was adjusted a little bit, or maybe, it's hard to say how all of this really went down, right? Whenever it came to translating this into English. So sometimes it's a matter of, how am I going to make you understand the story that is from a culture that's nothing like your culture, right? And sometimes we might use a device like, okay, I've heard you guys have this devil guy. Okay, well, it's kind of like that. You can just kind of imagine how sometimes there's these things that it's like, okay, the way that we understand things sometimes make differences in the way we translate things. We don't know. There's no way to know for sure. After this tumult, the good mind repaired to the battleground and then visited the people and retires from the earth. And so we had a victory of good over evil. These concepts, right, from the beginning, because we have to, you got to think about this. And I think all people eventually pretty early think about, why is there bad things, right? Why is there bad things in the world? Why is it that some people are, doing good things and some people are doing bad things? Why is it that I know the difference? And so we see this in a lot of the creation myths. Now, did you guys read the Navajo creation myth? This one's a lot of fun for different reasons. It's a little bit longer, but there's a lot of stuff going on here. And if you didn't read it, you can be honest, because, hey, we're not even recording, right? And I want you to be honest with me, but I'd like you to read these things, right? But I want to, but the reason why I sometimes ask is because I want to know if I can joke with you, or if I can, like, if you're going to be in on it, or if I can make a reference and you're going to get it. Hopefully you took a look at the Navajo creation story. Does anybody want to say anything about the Navajo creation story at all?
I read it I don't have my book yet. I read it online and I did not really get it.
Okay, so online there are so many different versions, right?
Yeah.
So okay. Now the Navajo creation story. Let's talk about it for just a minute then. So there's a lot of, essentially, it's a story of transfer. There's multiple stories here. Okay, multiple stories. But when it comes to creation, the actual creation, it's a story like they have it titled here. They even just call it the emergence. So whereas in like Judeo-Christian beliefs, okay, day one, this got made, day two, this got made, day three, right? With the Navajo creation myth is different in the fact that it's almost as if everything that exists we've been going through these different worlds together. Now, this especially happened after the flood. And of course, isn't this interesting, right? So they have a flood myth. And the funny thing is here is that we're pretty sure, and even it says it here in the footnote, that this culture did not know, it had no knowledge of Noah's, like the flood, Noah's flood, or the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? All the things that we have in Western culture where we have this, flood narrative, that they may not have had they may not have known about it at all. Let's see here. I think it says that here somewhere. Now, did anybody notice how like there's an enormous amount of like, man, these people are horny. Like there's adultery all the time. Did you guys notice that? Okay, if you haven't read it, this is the one, to be honest. It's longer, but it's far more entertaining. You're like, man, they keep having adultery. They keep getting kicked out of this place or that place because they can't stop. They go through all these different worlds, and but they start early on as these spiritual creatures. And as it says on page 36, near the end, the trouble began because of adultery. So, I mean, we're talking first page that you're reading in your textbook. First page, they're having adultery all the time, and that's when the trouble began. Okay, and then there was a flood, and then sudden. This is just cliff noting here, just to kind of make sure, Ashley, that you get an idea. And did anybody else read it on the internet too? And it's like, what the hell did I read?
I did.
Yeah, okay, I get it if you're not sure what you read, because this is many stories, okay? There's a lot of little stories here. So, okay, so what happened is they started off. Now, one of the things that gets confusing is how many different kinds of characters there are in the story as well. And just to simplify things, so we have first man, first woman, okay, so the kind of like a human. Then we also have the holy people. We have the animals. So the animals have a whole part in our the Navajo mythology as far as creation goes. Later on in the story, we find out that the reason why we are mortal, the reason why we all have to die, is because the coyote said, "Hey guys, we should die, because if we don't, there's just going to be so many of us. And everybody was like, "Ah, oh, man!" Like there's a part in there where they were all so happy. Like I think it was the holy people. They created this thing, is this cup, and they said, if it floats, then we all live forever. If it sinks, then we'll die.
Yeah.
you know, and then so they threw it in the water and it floated, and they're like, oh, awesome, we all get to live forever. And the coyote is like, no, we need to die. And so, so I mean, so animals and plants, everything has a part in this creation story, and it's not like it was created and it was good, right? Kind of like the Judeo-Christian. This one is more like a process of becoming, and there's these, and there's a kind of a theme. There's themes of black and white. There's themes of the number 4. There's these different themes that you're going to see, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm an expert on you know, Native American literature, but what we do see here are aspects of the culture that define how they think about things. So if you went to one of these places and spoke to like a Navajo elder or something like that, these are going to be aspects, just like, for instance, in Judeo-Christian culture, 3 is a big deal, right? 3, 7, 40. So those are things that you're going to see in the Judeo-Christian culture. In the Navajo culture, the number 4, the 4 directions, you know, the north, south, east, and west. You're seeing the feminine and the masculine. Of course, you see that in a lot of different cultures as well. But you're seeing those things as they are represented in various ways. The power of nature, the interconnectedness of nature. So, okay, so let's see here. I'm going to give you some cliff notes. So they started off, but because of in the first world, and so the first world, they angered the holy people because they just couldn't stop adultering. And so then there was this flood, and then a blue head emerged from the sky and said, go to the east. So they needed to get out of there, right? So they went to the east. And let's see, I'll skip ahead. They found themselves in the blue world with the blue beings. They couldn't help themselves, but they started doing it with the blue people's wives. Then they got kicked out of there, and then this white head mysteriously appeared. Go south. Okay, so they went south, and they went to the land of the locusts and grasshoppers, right? And next thing you know, wouldn't you know it, they couldn't help it. They started, as it says here, they grew weak, and they committed adultery with the wife of the grasshopper. Man. So then the grasshopper said, what are you, they said, you know, get out of here, you gotta leave. This time, when they encountered the sky, there was a redhead that materialized, said go west. So they went west. And so they found themselves, let's see here, looking at my notes. Eventually, they found themselves with the holy people, and they didn't speak, but they tried to communicate through motions and gestures. They said, listen, we're trying to create some humans, but, and I love what they said about these guys. It said, so they had different colors of bodies, and so, and each represented a direction. So, for instance, black body represented the north. And so black body finally spoke, and he said, we want to make more people, but in forms that are more pleasing to us. So, I mean, he's kind of slamming, right? Slamming them. He said, you have bodies like us, but you have teeth, feet, and claws of insects, and 4 legs. And you smell bad. Like literally, he says that. But first, you must purify yourselves before we return. And so they washed themselves. And so basically, essentially, they were made into humans. And that's kind of how we got where we are. And then that's kind of how we became humans. And then the first man was given a rock crystal, which was the symbol of clear thought, to burn for fire. And the first woman was given turquoise, which represents power of speech, to burn. In 4 days, of course, you're going to find 4 all the time. In 4 days, a pair of twins were born to them. Fast pregnancy. You know, they really had a better, I mean, 4 days of pregnancy. Let me just say, those were the good old days. So, okay, only 4 days. Okay, in 4 days, they had twins. And these were the first children. And these twins had the spirit of both male and female. Okay, so it was this perfect balance of male and female, masculine and feminine. And they were the first twins. And then they continued to have a lot more twins after that, just kind of summarizing. We're going to read our stuff, though, this semester, right? Okay, good. I want you to make sure you're reading. I'm not going to always tell you the stories, but this one I will say, I mean, there's a lot of things that make this particular story a little confusing, especially as your first reading. I have to put it at the beginning of American literature because that's where it goes, historically speaking. But it's kind of difficult to understand. There are no paragraphs. There's a lot of different stories going on. Tons of characters, lots and lots of characters. And I'm just glazing over a lot of this just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on here. Let's see here. Eventually, okay, and then this is whenever they were trying to figure out, okay, these new humans, what's going to happen with them? They need to know good and evil. Okay, they know good and evil. Will they live forever? Well, okay, and I told you the story. They made this bowl. And then even though the bowl floated, that coyote, he said, no, we need to die. And then that's pretty much how we became human. But that's only, I mean, not even halfway through this narrative here. Okay. Then we had the first marital quarrel. Okay. So I love how they put that in there. Okay. Because, hey, I don't know if you're married, guys. I assume you're not married, but it happens, right? And this is a part of any society. So any society that's going to last, they knew, and this is, I mean, they knew that they had to impart this knowledge. Listen, okay, men and women, we've got a hard time of it sometimes getting along. We see things differently, and we're going to get in fights. But we have to stay together. We have to learn to love each other. And this state of marriage, of course, is something that they're discussing, okay? So they got in the first fight. So guess what the fight was about? And now let me just tell you this. I'm not sure if I've glazed. Yeah, I haven't glazed over much of this. Okay, so the first fight was, so the women farmed. They were really good at farming, and the men were really good at hunting. And so the women decided, hey, we will we'll be with you guys, but because we're hungry for meat. And so they formed unions. They became married. All these things, right? So then what we have here is a dispute that arose where the man this is first man now. Okay, so he's a specific character. So first man and first woman, they're specific characters, and then there's men and women. So first man came back with his hunt, and apparently first woman insulted him and said, it's not that great, right? Now, if you have your textbook, I don't know if I'm going to say this out loud, but if you look on page 39, at footnote number 5, you can see what other versions of the story, the woman said something quite crass. We'll just leave it at that. Does anybody have their book? Do you guys have your book? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. If you have your book, you can see kind of, I mean, this is kind of it gets a little vulgar there. Anyway, the point is, so they had a fight. So the first man said, okay, we don't need you women anymore. So he got all the other guys, and it's like, why are we putting up with these women? Let's leave. And so they went across the river, and they made a little settlement there. It was far enough that they weren't with the women, but it was close enough that they could tease each other and like, throw insults at each other. So the first winter came, and the women were really in good shape. Their crops came up, and they were teasing the men. Hey, wouldn't you like to have some squash? Too bad, because you guys are a bunch of jerkholes, and all these things back and forth. And then the next year, and that first year, the men, they had moved away, so they didn't have time to plan anything. So they were really hungry that first year. And then the second year, the men had a better farm than the women, so they were teasing back, and they were teasing back and forth. Now, this is also whenever so there's always this instance of lust. There's there's so adultery, and not necessarily just adultery, but sexual desire comes into play. Okay, so the reason I have to tell you about this, right, and it would be nice if you already read this. It's kind of, okay, some of you already read this, I know. And I'm not scolding. You guys realize I'm not scolding, right? So yeah, you're not scolding, Professor Coomer. You just wish I would have read it. So because it's kind of uncomfortable to say some things. It would be like, hey, did you see what they wrote? Have you ever done that? Like, you know what I'm saying? Did you see what they wrote? I saw what they wrote. But here I am, I'm having to say, okay, so the women, Ashley, do you know what I'm about to say? You don't have to say it.
I think so.
Okay. It has to do with cactuses and smooth stones.
Yeah.
Okay. So the women, let's just say they got really lonesome without men to be there to give them satisfaction. And so they used stones and cactuses for pleasure. The reason I have to tell you that is because this eventually it created a race of monsters that had to be killed at the end. Okay, so I have to tell you, and at the very end, they're like, by the way, the monsters were created. Remember that thing where they were using the stones? Well, that's how the monsters got here. Anyway, so that happened. Eventually, they went for like 3 or 4 years being apart, and they were like, guys, if we don't ever get back together again, the whole race is going to die. We're all going to die.
Mm-hmm.
There's not going to be any kids. And so first man and first woman, they worked it out. And they said, okay, we're going to work it out. And so we came back together as one species again. And then, let's see here. I mean, there's all kinds of cool stuff in this story. Let's see here. What happened after that? Let's see. I got all flustered telling you about the cactuses, and I lost my place. So they came back together again, and then there was a flood. So they noticed a strange light that was coming from the wall of water, and it was converging on them at all sides. The people fled. There was a flood, and they had to go to the next world. And it's kind of interesting how, when I read this, I think about the picture of, it wasn't just the humans, right? It was all of these different creatures, and some of them were spiritual creatures, and some of them were animals. And it says that as they were leaving this particular world, the turkey was the last one to leave. And he was the last one to climb out, and his white-tipped tail feathers remain to this day as a reminder of their escape. Now, I'm not 100% sure how that is manifest. Oftentimes we think about, when it comes to the flood, right, we think about in the Judeo-Christian tradition, there is the rainbow image at the end, right, as a promise that there would be no more floods that were going to kill everybody. Well, later on in this story, we also have a rainbow image, and it's near the end. So I'm not sure what exactly the turkey tail, what we should see in the natural world to denote, oh, there's, the turkey tail. It could be, I always think about, it could be like clouds or, something of that nature, but it doesn't really give us any information on that. Anyway, they kept climbing through to the 5th world. Now, this is where this story is going to vary, because many versions of the story, there's only 4 worlds. In this particular translation, we get the 5th world, and that's the world we are in now. Other versions, and actually I've heard, there is actually the first time I heard this story was a Native American storyteller, and he said we're in the third world, and there's 4 worlds, and we're in the third world. So there's definitely different versions of this out there, but in this particular one, we're in the 5th world, and that's where we reside today. And essentially, it kind of wraps up with there's these monsters that come out, and again, I told you why they exist, and they were eventually defeated. And then let's see here. And then, but it took us down to where there was only like 4 people left. I mean, we were barely existing. And overall, like it's, let's see here. Overall, then again, there were a bunch of twins that were born. And it's almost like we have a bunch of new characters suddenly emerge. And then one of the last monsters to perish was the son of the sun. However, because he was killing people, the sun decided to help the twins stop him. So he gave the twins weapons made of lightning and taught them magic and enabled them to travel high over the land. Guys, I just realized it's time for the end of class. I can never, guys, I apologize. You can always stop me. Believe you say, hey, Professor Coomer, you can stop. You can stop now. And I'm at work, and you're just letting me off easy. So anyway, guys, thanks so much for being here. I'm going to let you go because I've got a class coming up in the next hour. If you have any questions, let me know. Make sure to do the readings for next week, and have a good week. All right, bye-bye.